Brian Bedford, our immediate past chair, has more than 30 years of experience in the airline industry. He's been the CEO of Republic Airways since 1999, growing the industry from a fleet of 36 turboprops generating $85 million annually to 200 plus E-Jet fleet generating more than $1.3 billion in revenue annually, and he's making his entrance just on time. Linda Markham is the President and Chief Administrative Officer of Cape Air, a position she has held since March 2013. Upon Linda's arrival at Cape Air, the company employed approximately 300 people and served 17 cities. Cape Air now employs approximately 850 people and serves 37 destinations in 4 regions around the world. Joe Miller, the COO of Endeavor Air, joined Endeavor's executive team in November 2017 after holding several key leadership roles at Delta Airlines. Joe has a diverse background, holding both a mechanical engineering degree and an MBA, and has worked in nearly every aspect of airline operations. Tim Combrick, President and CEO of Empire Airlines, has been actively involved in aviation since 1971. He's logged over 13,000 hours as an airline pilot, check airman, and instructor. He's an airline transport pilot with type ratings in several aircraft. Lyle Hogg, the President and CEO of Piedmont Airlines, began his career in aviation as a regional airline pilot for Pilgrim Airlines, in 1981 flying the de Havilland Twin Otter Dash 6, a predecessor to the Dash 8. He served as Vice President of Flight Operations for U.S. Airways, giving him insight into mainline operations. Steve Linthwaite has been Vice President of Flight Operations for Jazz Aviation, Canada's largest regional airline, for more than 8 years. He's responsible for the safe and efficient administration of matters pertaining to flight operations, flight training and standards, in-flight services, in-flight training, and onboard product. So before we begin, a note on format. Our time is limited for such an esteemed panel, but we do expect to take a couple of audience questions before we close out. And additionally, our panelists will be on site today, so I hope that the good conversations that we start now can continue next door in our exhibit hall. So let's begin. As I make my way over here. So rather than asking for opening remarks, I thought I would ask a question down the line. And so we're going to start off with a straightforward question, first for Rick, then Brian, Lyle, and Steve. Oh, we heard a little bit about this from the panel this morning, but why do mainlines use regional airlines?
Well, I think it's some key strategic components. And one is the safe, quality, dependable, efficient air service. I think that's what the players in the marketplace today bring to our partners. It allows them to increase their reach without increasing their risk in any way. It can bring value, bring that feed that was talked about this morning that is so important to justify the larger aircraft, to fill those aircraft at the hub points. And I think that with the ways that the regionals have all, and we all do sort of kind of the same thing, but we approach it in different ways. You know, some of us are private companies like ourselves, some of us are large public companies. But I think we all provide a quality product to our partners of which they value, and it allows them to, whether it's augmenting the market or gives them the opportunity to actually serve a market that they otherwise would be prevented from serving. So it's an important part. Like they said, I think the speakers this morning, it's over 50% usually on average of the capacity as far as activity, departures. It obviously plays a very strategically important, vital role.
Well, having been in business for over 30 years, we've seen a lot of transition in the regional airline space in that time. And we've seen a tremendous change even in the RAA makeup. Back from the Commuter Airline Association 30 plus years ago, where we had over 150 regional airlines. And in that DNA were very entrepreneurial men and women who got into this business because they were passionate about aviation, and each were doing some, as Rick said, some unique things. But the primary mission of regionals were to connect small town America to larger markets, and that really hasn't changed over the last 30 years. Our role is still to fly markets that don't support the large capacity planes that our mainline partners fly, to connect small town America to major transportation hubs and ultimately to the globe. So it's a very critical mission that regionals provide, and as Rick said, our continued reason for being is, we focus on markets that our mainline partners just can't access cost effectively. And as long as we maintain that that sort of economic value proposition where we can reach these markets in a cost-effective way. I think will continue to be relevant in the makeup of commercial airspace, for the foreseeable future.
Miles?
Just to add what these gentlemen have said, the regional aircraft allow a mainline carrier to kind of vary what type of aircraft serves a given market. So for example, with Piedmont Airlines, we have all 50-seat jets, and we serve, for American Airlines, very, very small communities. But at a given time of year, or in a given market, American Airlines might choose to put a 76-seat aircraft on a given market, or a 65-seat aircraft on a given market. And that could change seasonally. But also we know that our passengers are very price sensitive, number one, and number two, they're very schedule sensitive. So in a given market, a mainline aircraft could serve a market once a day, but we know our passengers want choice and want to be able to depart some of these small airports several times a day. So that's where regional aircraft can serve a market better than perhaps one flight a day on a mainline aircraft. So it gives the mainline carrier great versatility in serving some of these smaller markets. And the citizens of the small markets, they have access to the entire world. They're one leg away from a major hub and connecting to overseas or to the West Coast or to South America. So it's really a great benefit to our small towns of America.
Steve?
Jazz, with a long history of having a relationship with Air Canada, being fully owned and now being an independent company operating under a capacity purchase agreement. I think I'll echo what other people have said. Part of our focus always has been connecting smaller communities, for instance, in Inner Ontario, Lieutenant is in Sudbury, most people don't even know where they are, into Toronto and fitting them into the system. But the other part of it is more being part of their growth strategy, and that's bringing the CRJ 900 product in with its, on the longer thin routes with business class, and that's allowing Air Canada to expand their connections overseas and that type of thing. So it's a two-pronged approach for us, and we're very proud to be part of it.
Thank you. Joe, this morning Savi mentioned that these days we're not just competing on cost, we're competing on product. And we know that Endeavor, as is the case across the industry, is tasked by Delta to offer a seamless product with the main line. So how do you do this? How do you maintain that level of service that's expected?
Well, if you go back 5 years and you look at, the panelists talked about it, it was more of a cost-centric type of model. And she was exactly right. When competing now on service and quality is so vital. So if we go back for Endeavor's case and we go back to 2014, there's a metric that we track. In fact, all the connection carriers track it. And it's 100% days. We call those brand days. And so going back to 2014, we had 56 brand days. And that's every flight completing for the full day on an average of 600 to 900 departures depending on the day. Last year, we had 223 brand days, every flight completed every day. And so that's kind of the foundational piece. And what we've seen here, and all of the people up here could talk about, is everybody's had to raise their game. Because that customer going from Brunswick to Paris and transiting on that 50-seater doesn't care who they're flying on. They just see, in our case, the Endeavor logo on the side of the airplane. The second thing I'll mention is that's when things go right. When things don't go right, which we all have to deal with those things every day, it's how do we recover? And that's that service recovery aspect. And a minor thing that we've seen be so effective and we coach our pilots on is getting them to do podium announcements or get them out in front of the customer. So for instance, for us, when we have a more than a 30-minute delay or longer, when they go out and do those announcements, we see NPS benefits of up to 30 points. Problem, solution, timeline, thank you. Real straightforward formula, but everybody who's on their headsets or their iPads, and when they see that captain come up there and make that announcement, you see heads come up, and they listen, and they now can make plans so they have more confidence in what we're going to deliver on. The third thing I'll mention is an investment in the employees. And when we talk about our in-flight group was the most time with the customer, We focused on providing them an incentive when they get a perfect 5. So Delta survey system, it's a 5-point scale. And if all the customers who answer that survey do a perfect 5, they're incented to do that. And there's a kind of a rewards program, and that keeps these employees kind of connected to the brand. So all 3 of these things have been effective in kind of raising the bar for the customer.
And Linda, Cape Air was mentioned this morning, but how are some of the other ways that regional airlines are building out the North American system, and where does an airline like Cape Air fit into that? You've got some new aircraft that you brought into the mix. In fact, we are getting new aircraft. Thank you, Fed. Cape Air is probably a really unique regional airline that are sitting up here on the panel. We move passengers 9 at a time. And so when Lyle talks about frequency for an operator like Cape Air, frequency is really important to the communities that we serve. We serve some of the most beautiful destinations, but we also serve a lot of the really small rural destinations, and it's really important to connect our passengers to the global network. Flying from Wolf Point, Montana to Billings, and then Billings and beyond. So a lot of the destinations that we fly are very rural, and the communities really love our service and really is really critical. Absolutely. And Tim, we know the cargo side of the equation is equally critical. So will you talk about the role that regionals play in the global cargo delivery network? It's not just packages, right?
Well, as I listened to the other panelists up here talk about how much of the market would not be served without our regional service. It's very similar in the cargo world. In fact, statistically, with the FedEx system, if there were not feeder carriers if there were not feeder carriers in the system, there'd be 98% of the geography in the U.S. that would not get their packages overnight. So, I mean, it's huge. When I try to explain to people that are not in the business what we do, as the term I use is we add zip codes. We are those zip codes that would not get an overnight package without our airplanes in the system. So it's amazing. You wouldn't get your starter generator for your airplane that broke. You wouldn't get the blood that was needed. The kidney might not get there. So it's vitally important to those small markets.
So vitally critical. Brian, Republic has had a lot of milestones this year. You celebrated the 45th anniversary and the 15th anniversary of flying the Embraer 170, and about a year ago you welcomed your first class to the Lift Academy. About a year, right? So I think it sure has, and I think those milestones really speak to the entrepreneurial spirit of this industry and the resilience of the people in it. So demand for air travel is strong. We heard the panel this morning talk about we're beginning to build markets with regionals again, even. But the pilot shortage persists. There are other challenges out there. We talked about the maintenance technician shortage as well. So how long will we be able to keep up air travel with these challenges, and if these challenges don't go resolved?
Well, I think 5 years ago when we first started telling the world that we were on the verge of getting into a pilot shortage, and there was a lot of head scratching about what was a pilot shortage, how do you define a pilot shortage, but clearly when you start parking airplanes because you don't have enough pilots to fly, that's a pilot shortage, right? And there's certainly a lot more market today that we would cover if we had the resources, crew resources to do it. Now, having said that, I feel better today than I did 5 years ago about where we are for 2 reasons. One, we've got a lot of industry-wide focus on this issue, unlike what we've had over the last 5 years. We're sharing data about the retirement profiles of pilots across the U.S. mainline system. We're looking at our collegiate partners and Part 61 training partners about what their capacity is. And with that data, you have a couple of conclusions you draw. First, there's not enough training capacity in the country to meet the needs of the crew development over the next 5 years when we will hit peak retirements. But that also adds a lot of clarity as a management team as to, well, then what are we going to do about it? Rather than talk about the problem, how do we become part of the solution? And so the Lift Academy, which we opened the doors last September, will be designed ultimately to produce a incremental source of pilots into the talent development system, at least in this country. And yes, it's focused on Republic's needs. Republic today has nearly 2,300 pilots on its payroll, flying our aircraft. And last year we hired 600 pilots. We're going to hire another 600 pilots this year. We're going to see 700 next year, 800 the year after that, 900 the year after that. And so while we need all the existing pipelines we enjoy today, we know that is not sufficient to give us the depth of talent that we need. So the Lift Academy is being scaled up. Our board just approved Lift Academy 2.0. So we're in site selection for that right now. We've placed another 50 diamond training aircraft in the order queue, which will take us to 100 training aircraft. We seated our 200th student this month. We'll be at 250 by the end of the year. We'll be over 400 by the end of next year. And the goal is to source half of our pilot need, through our proprietary pipeline. But again, it's when we look at the barriers of entry, and Faye, you talk about these all the time, it's how long it takes to become a pilot, how much it costs to become a pilot, and then just the general awareness about the return on that investment for moms and dads. And so, our team at Lyft has done a tremendous job just reaching out, into the junior high school levels and high school levels. We have a mobile lab, simulator lab that goes out into schools and STEM fairs and Oshkosh, right? And so it's just been fantastic to watch young people see the potential passion of being able to become an airline pilot or an airline technician. It's really gratifying. So I sleep a lot better tonight than I did 5 years ago. I feel like the industry's finally, taking more control of the issue. There's again, just tremendous awareness that we have a problem and we can do better. We heard the earlier panel talk about the use of SIM technology, but I mean, we really do need our FAA partners to play a role in the solution here. And I don't mean reducing the hours. No one's arguing about reduce 1,500 hours. We're past that. We moved beyond that, okay? But we can still provide a better training and curriculum structure training environment within that 1,500-hour regime, using simulators as an example to help build that time.
Well, I think that's exactly right. I think when we talk about the first officer qualification rule, what we ought to be talking about is not the pilot shortage, but are we training pilots the best way that we can? And I think down the track, we would all agree that we're not today. We're going to get into that in just a minute, but first, you mentioned reaching out into students, very at a younger age and exposing them. And I think we're all doing those types of things. And one of the things that's just been a resounding cry for action is that we need to diversify our flight decks and maintenance technicians as well. And you're doing a tremendous job with this. And Steve, I know that you're doing a lot in Canada with the indigenous populations, but the question is really to all, what are you doing on this? What are you actively doing to bring more diversity into our aviation workforce?
I'll speak to it. I have a few slides. It's only 47 slides here. It's only 5 or 6 slides. At Jazz, we really we put it's part of our core values, embracing diversity and knowing that children are different to become a stronger company. So we really put a focus on this as a culture at Jazz. And I think also from a more practical point of view, we talk about the shortage in the industry. We have untapped people that think they have whatever reasons they don't know how to do it. So I think our responsibility, what we've really worked on at Jazz, is trying to build those pathways, those partnerships that encourage that. Next slide. So, I mean, I won't get too far into this. Maybe we'll just, but I really, you have to look at the short-term, medium-term, and long-term requirements for this. And I think we'll just keep moving through. One of the key ones that I'll talk as we move into the next slide is promoting role models. What we put a real focus on is making sure that the people who we're trying to recruit, we try to target it. We have female captains or female first officers. We participate in some of the indigenous career things. We make sure the indigenous members of our of Jazz, employees of Jazz, participate as well, and really get those role models out. I always use the example as a white male. When I was 18, I had lots of options. and what we need to do, because I saw a bunch of white males doing a lot of things out there. And so what you really need to do is get that more diverse part of your employee group out there and show young people that they can do it. And it seems real simple, but I always use the example as well in terms of how to become a pilot or how to become an AME. There's been discussion about that and how you get that career. It's a big, scary world, and while social media is powerful, it's also overwhelming. So it's important to get the message out to young people how you become a particular profession, and it makes it a lot easier. Our Jazz Aviation Pathways program for pilots is a good example of that, where we've tried to really use social media, which is really just a free way to advertise and show people how you become a pilot. So we built this showing people, and I'll point out the Air Cadet, which is the Air Cadet League of Canada, which is a small circle off to the bottom of the circle there, and that's equivalent of the Civil Air Patrol, is probably the closest thing you have in the States, and that's all young people between about 10 and 19, and most of them are between 10 and 15, 50% female. Right there is just a great opportunity to target young females and show them the way to become a pilot, an AME, or whatever interest they have in aviation. So we've really, we actually have a connection now where there's a power program at the Air Cadets, and we give 2 of those award people every year, another $3,000 if they go to one of our Jazz Aviation Pathway schools that are listed around. And the success of that is we just started this 2-3 years ago, and we're hiring our first direct entry former Air Cadet that actually got our scholarship a few years ago, went to one of our flight training institutions, and we're hiring him next month. It's little things, and it's only small, but you start with the small examples and it builds from there. So the pathways, and as well, right from the start with our pathways program, we always give out a Jazz Aviation Pathway Award for professionalism. At the very start, we also had an equivalent award, the same amount, $3,000 for diversity as well. So every school each year picks one top performing individual, and we validate it. We generally take the advice of the institution. They win $3,000. They get $3,000 towards their education to use whatever way they want. Which, as a pilot especially, there's no problem using $3,000. But as well, they get an opportunity and they get an interview for a possible direct entry position with us. So that's one way. Next slide, please. Also, one of the real difficult areas is Indigenous people in North America. And because of the history, and justifiably, they are very careful of how they deal with a large company or a large institution. So what we've done is it's a very relationship-based situation we have with the Indigenous population, but we've tried to create relationships and opportunities. And getting back to my short, medium, long term, and I think the Lift Academy is a great example of this, is with the Indigenous community, this is at best a medium, if not a long term, you have to set, because there's a whole culture there of having no opportunity to do the things we're talking about. So it's going to take, you've got to attract the 10-year-olds now to say that they know that in the future they could become a pilot or a flight attendant or an AME. So we have a relationship, for instance, with the First Nations Training Institute. It's an Indigenous flight school in Southern Ontario, and they have summer camps. And so actually those are triplets there, if you believe it. They're those ladies with the jazz hats, the photos there. And we see a real opportunity in that to spark the interest. So that's one as well. I'm also in charge of in-flight. We have a relationship with Rootsland Institute, and they provide French training because our flight attendants have to be bilingual. So they provide French training, and we give them opportunities for jobs. So we hired a class of 6, I believe, last year, and we're continuing that to get more Indigenous people into that. Next slide, please. Let's keep moving. Anyways, we can just get through these. We'll go back to our questions. Part of the awareness, it's awareness, and they're just getting by the traditional thinking. Keep moving on. Thank you. And then the other key I think you have to think about when you get into this is retention. So we have Indigenous, we have a lot of diversity groups. We have our Diversity Council, Indigenous Employee Group, LGBT, and then also once they're there, we have the course for women, which helps females inside our company progress. And we're quite proud. I think it's the last 7 years we've won one of the best Canada's best diversity employers. So things like that helps us recruit and attract people into those non-traditional roles. And that's just to recap. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Steve. And anyone else? And Linda, you're on the board of Women in Aviation International. So
I am. I'm on the board of Women in Aviation International. I'm going to be the incoming chair this year, so I'm very excited about that. I actually think it starts at the sea level. I think if you look at this panel, you have one female sitting up here, besides our moderator, and I think that we need more women in leadership roles to be able to promote more women in aviation. Historically, aviation has really been a male-dominated industry, and it certainly has made great strides over the years, but we still have a long way to go. So I would say more women in leadership, senior leadership roles on the boards, and really then be able to promote women throughout the organization. We do a lot with Girls in Aviation that we host every year at Cape Air. We have a lot of internal programs where we support our females who want to become pilots through financial commitments at Cape Air. And today we have half of our chief pilots are females. So we're really trying to make great strides just to improve the whole knowledge base of women in the industry and what they can become beyond pilots and technicians.
What are some of the other programs that are working for the others?
So, the pilot pipeline really dried up after 9/11. It was a difficult decade for the airline business. Airlines were furloughing pilots. It was concessionary contracts, labor contracts, and it was a difficult time. But when it came time, when the industry became more attractive again to young aviators, it had gotten so expensive that there was roadblocks to people who did not have the funds to get into aviation. And so we've all done things to try to encourage people from inner cities or people of color to get into aviation. And so, for example, at Piedmont Airlines, we have programs where we help finance education for young people, particularly those who get out and become a CFI. That's typically when your student loans come due. And so we help young CFIs pay those student loans. And we also provide bonuses for those people who are coming to work for our airline. Additionally, our parent company, American Airlines, has a cadet program as well. And through that program, people can get low interest loans to make it a little bit easier to enter the business. There's many pathways to become an airline pilot or a maintenance technician. But some of those pathways now are starting to dry up a little bit. For example, some of the military transition programs are starting to be tapped out a little bit. So we're realizing that we have to grow our own, whether it be a pilot. We have to partner with the aviation programs throughout the country for mechanics. We have to partner with the maintenance schools throughout the country and really kind of grow the industry ourselves at the grassroots level. And I think we're all doing that to the best of our ability.
Well, I was just going to say that this has been a challenge for the industry since inception, right? And I think a lot of it stems from the fact that most aviators came out of a military background, and the military, and unfortunately until very recently, wasn't terribly welcoming of females in the cockpit either. But as those barriers fall, we continue to see barriers in the commercial side fall as well. And the focus for the future is to be much more intentional in our recruiting efforts for better diversity in the cockpit, whether that's female or minority. I think both are an equal challenge. At the Lift Academy, the doors open for everybody. We're casting a wide net, looking for people who are just passionate about aviation. The Academy Dean is one of our former assistant chief pilots, Dana Donati. She's an excellent role model for women in aviation. Her chief pilot, Ashley Gomez, is another wonderful role model for women in aviation. So again, the airline industry wants the best people, and if those best people turn out to be either diversity candidates, a minority or a female, that's just icing on the cake. We're not going to reduce our standards just to create pathways for selected people, but I think we can again be more intentional in our recruiting efforts, and that means looking at these initial steps in the pathway to a career in aviation, whether that's in the cockpit, whether it's in the hangar, whether it's management. And so I think the public's done a great job of focusing on that and improving in all those areas, but we can do more. And even with our intentional efforts, at the Academy, we're still under 20%.
But a lot better than 7%.
But a lot better than 7, yeah, that's right. So there is hope.
We're making progress, although, as you say, Linda, not quite enough, and I agree, also, women at the top, women in leadership roles, because those few of us there, we recognize one another, and there's a little family to it, isn't there? So, but we've heard a lot do have to get experience now, and the other ways to support them getting experience earlier in their career, and you've gotten a lot of credit, rightfully so, for the innovative training programs that you're doing. Will you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I think many people are aware of the University Gateway program that we have partnered with JetBlue, and that is where we hire somebody in the 10th grade, so they become part of the Cape Air JetBlue family at a very young age. They're assigned mentors. They come and they do an internship at Cape Air or JetBlue, and then they will go through a defined pathway program. To date, we have over 70 pilots that have gone through that program and are still at JetBlue, so there has been zero attrition, so that has been a real success story. But one of the other creative things that we've done over the past, because we're really trying to make a small difference in the supply of in the pilot industry, is we have our first officer farm team, where we're able to hire pilots. It's not a requirement that we have a first officer in our 9-seat aircraft. So we're able to hire lower time pilots, typically around 500 hours, and then they can sit right seat and build time until they get to 1,500 hours, and then we upgrade them and they stay with Cape Air for another 1,000 hours, and then they can move on. We all know that pilots are going to go on to other major airlines, and Cape Air is certainly one of the best, I think, one of the best initial starts for a pilot's career. We do some of the most challenging flying and some of the most challenging weather conditions. They're learning instruments. They're really having great mentorships. We not only have great pilots that work for Cape Air, but we also have a great Gold program where we have the ability to hire captains that retire from major airlines because we don't have the retirement mandate. So they come back and fly because they have a passion for aviation. But we also found that they are probably some of the best mentors that we have that are currently flying the line. We've worked really hard with our union reps to have the ability to hire people part-time. So a lot of the people who want to come back and fly, they might not want to fly full-time. So we've done some part-time flying and on-call flying, and it's really good to have that diversity in our pilot group.
That's wonderful. So I'm going to open it up for a couple of audience questions if we have any. Any questions in the audience? Okay, I've got another one for you.
There's some right there.
Oh, we've got some? Okay.
Just on the topic of now pilot training becoming a lot more expensive, and I was wondering if you're having any, what the relationship or the partnership is with the major airlines in addressing some of these kind of pilot training issues and hiring issues.
So I can speak for American Airlines in that the better our training is, knowing that our pilots, we have a flow program, so our pilots flow directly into American Airlines. The better our training programs are, and the more standardized our pilots become, we provide a better product to American Airlines. So American is easily in favor of investing in our training programs. As a matter of fact, we try to align our training programs and our procedures as closely as possible to the procedures that American Airlines uses, so that when our pilots do flow to American, they have they're already very familiar with some non-aircraft procedures. They already fly into the American hubs. They already wear the American uniforms. And if we can make our procedures as close as possible to Americans, it just makes it that much easier for our pilots to become an American Airlines pilot someday. So we're very tied to our parent company from a training perspective.
Any other comments on that?
Well, in our case, working closely with our partner FedEx, we designed a program called the Purple Runway, and it is going to be a long-term program. We're seeing success out of it already, but it's truly an alignment of the men and women that want to go into this program have an opportunity to come to work for us. And while they're with us, they go through the qualification steps to make sure that they are go through the various steps that FedEx needs for them to become ultimately a mainline pilot. It's designed to be kind of an integrated and seamless process, and we're really excited about it because it's that opportunity, as it is with everybody that has a flow-through or direct hire. If you want to retire in this industry out of the left seat of a 777 for FedEx, there's a unique opportunity to be able to do it while you're still a young, low-time pilot and build your time. We're also, in the future, there's new aircraft coming into the FedEx system. The one I really have my eye on is the Cessna 408, which is a modern, new design, twin-engine turboprop. Very excited about, and that's going to be a platform that we're going to use to be able to develop the right seat program like Linda's able to do, because that airplane is going to be operated under 135, and so it's going to allow us to start those 500-600-hour young professionals going down that path. And so they can come in, be a Purple Runway candidate, go into the right seat of the 408 until they get 1,200 hours plus. They can move to the left seat of the 408, or they can move to the right seat of the ATR, and so on and so forth. So we're very, very excited about those programs.
I think that I've been letting everybody talk because I've talked enough the last couple of days, but on this point, I do believe that the wholly owned carriers have a bit of an edge and advantage over those of us that are independent when it comes to having more intimate programs with the mainline provider that they work for or work with or they're owned by. And we've had to be a lot more creative. I do believe I spent a lot of time talking with some of the leadership at the various majors, and it's really important for us to keep these valuable assets, these valuable pilot assets in the brand, to create a pathway and show a roadmap for them to achieve their career objectives by staying with us and then immediately being able to partner with a brand that they've embraced and that they've been flying for, a cultural brand that they have supported for years. And I think we got to do a better job of that, and hopefully more of those kind of programs that not just are in place for a wholly owned carrier, but also more in place for the other carriers that provide these important services as part of the portfolio of those brands. We, on the other hand, we used to have one of those at Compass back with Delta years ago, and it was a great program. It was a guaranteed job program back in the day, and our turnover was down in low single digits because people wanted that job with Delta Airlines. It pays many benefits just not having that churn and turnover, and reduces costs and increases quality and all that kind of stuff. But what we've done at our carriers is even branched out to be able to offer something, a career opportunity or a pathway that would exist and be of value to our folks. Is we've looked at other type of network type providers other than the three majors, and have developed programs with them that are abilities for them to get into that carrier, whether it's believe it or not, a Frontier or a Spirit or something like that, or a JetBlue like being done down here. There are some people that want to fly for that carrier. They don't want to fly for maybe American or United. But anything we can do to offer value to our current pilots and our prospective pilots and mechanics, quite frankly, I think programs like this we need to look at for mechanics to show pathways as well, is important. But we've had to be a lot more creative on the independent side. That's not wholly owned. We're getting it done, but we got to be a lot more creative. But I think there's a lot more that can be done, and hopefully over time, the major partners will see that there's value of keeping all the pilots that fly within their brand committed to their brand and not flowing over to another.
I think to answer the question that was asked, what are the majors doing to support taking some of the barriers. There's a little, unfortunately probably not enough. Delta has a cadet program, if you will, with 5 different college and training providers in the Alabama and Georgia area. Auburn University, I know, is now a sort of a cadet program for Delta. United has implemented a program with Metro City in Denver, where they're providing some scholarship opportunities for students to attend Metro College aviation program. And American, as Lyle mentioned, I think has 5 cadet programs where they're providing some nominal financing opportunities for students. So it's very embryonic, but there are some examples of the majors doing some sort of toe in the water, if you will, undertakings to try to knock down some of the barriers to facilitate pilot development.
Well, we've seen a lot of renewed interest in the career. We talked about this a little bit yesterday, but really for all the panelists, do you think that there are enough pathways in? We've seen that the number of student pilots that are gaining their restricted ATP, that number is steadily increasing. I think that shows that there's a strong demand for that. But are there enough of those opportunities out there? And then for the students who are pursuing them, are they able financially to get in? I think we know the answer is no, but what should we be doing to change that? I'm going to start with Tim down at the very end. I mean, what's your take on that specific question?
Well, I applied for 2 customers, and both have stepped forward with programs to help create pathways. And in the case of FedEx, kind of to add on to what Brian was saying down there, they have become very active in direct scholarships to a number of colleges, and I have to add significant scholarships. And so they're taking, in my mind, an extremely active role. And those are all potential candidates for us to put into the Purple Runway program and so on and so forth. So that's helping a lot on that side. On the Hawaiian Airlines side, we have just completed a flow-through program. We have an agreement with them. We're just now implementing it, and again, for that carrier, those pilots out there in the islands are quite excited about that. But I think that I don't think you could have too many pathway programs, and I think that the ability to work with these young people, stimulate them. I mean, when we go to a college recruiting, we're all looking for the same candidate. You go to a job fair, we're all out there looking for that same candidate. And I really think that much of what's being done and these pathways for some of these students, we've got to figure out a way maybe almost to individualize them. They all kind of have different economic challenges or different barriers or different opportunities, and depending on who the candidates are, I really believe it's kind of grassroots groups to develop these young folks. And I think we're going to have to continue to get creative and inventive. And so much of it does evolve around money, but as many of us here are doing, a huge amount of it is mentoring and making sure that we're keeping these young people on the right path so they're going to become the true professional pilots.
You talked about the barriers too. I think that's really the key. When we talk about the issue, I think we have seen a lot of this renewed interest, but the expanse is very large. And so some of the things that we've been trying to do, of course, the higher ed bill, maybe getting access to Title IV funding for the non-collegiate pathway, increasing the amount of the student loan caps, right-sizing it like we do with other professions.
GI Bill,
yeah.
changes to allow.
But what are some of the creative things we should be doing?
So certainly government has to be part of that solution. Private enterprise, in our case at least, we've gone to the commercial market, we've developed funding sources for students to be able to support loans. Part of the value proposition we talk to families about is, and I think it's a little different than what you see in traditional training schools, is we want a high washout rate, right? If you know, we think we do a lot of personal testing and assessments to see whether the student might have the right, attributes and skill sets in order to be successful as a commercial airline pilot. But you really don't know until you get them into the training process, and so we establish gates, and if they can't get through the gates in a timely way, we take them out of the process because we want to assure mom and dad we're not going to waste your money, okay? A lot of schools, unfortunately, will train, as long as the check's cash, training will continue to be delivered, and that's really not doing a service to the students who actually aspire to a job they're unlikely to be able to hold. Making sure, again, that we're being responsible with people's money. I think the government certainly can provide student loan funding at a much lower interest rate than what we're able to gain from commercial banks. But there are things that are out there that, the industry needs to take advantage of. Again, we just received Department of Labor qualification under the National Apprentice Jobs Creation Program. And so now our CFIs qualify for that support, as well as creating a new AMT pathway program, apprentice program. So again, these are not going to be, world-changing, problem solving in the absolute sense, but they're parts of the puzzle that have to come together to create new pathways for students. I think we can talk about, the new FAA administrator, Steve Dixon, picks up on the conversation that Randy was having earlier about, if we do simulator credit, should that count for more than one unstructured hour of flying a single engine plane in daylight VFR? And I think the answer is it should, because it's a lot more expensive to deliver structured simulator training than it is to put a former student in a non-controlled environment in a single engine, propeller plane. So, we just have to be sensible about how we're delivering structured training to students and do it in the most economical fashion possible.
Steve, what are you experiencing in Canada?
Personally, I believe, because of the great job industry's done right across North America, I think the pathways are there. I think the interest is there. We're starting to see it. In my mind, the biggest impediment, and I think it's to the lady's comment, is the finance part. And to your point, I think government does have to get involved and sort of solve this problem more so and recognize it as in case it's good on the AME side. Luckily, there's colleges in Canada that you go and get subsidized education, become an apprentice AME, which is great. So that's there. But on the pilot side, that financing continues to be the biggest impediment, especially if government really sincerely wants us to diversify our workforce and get people, that would not traditionally become a pilot into the role. That's how you're going to break that chain in my mind.
Okay. So, go ahead.
I was just going to add, I'm glad Brian's sleeping better at night. But, we're really, we're really not out of the woods as far as our needs for pilots. The attrition at the mainline level is going to increase from here. And as Rick said, we've got to continue to be really creative to keep this pipeline full, whether it be financially or other ideas to attract young aviators. So we're doing okay right now. We've made a lot of progress, but the next few years is going to be very challenging as well.
I think that's a great point indeed, Lyle. And if we look at the Airmen's database and the ages there, almost half of those pilots today will be retiring within 15 years. So anyone who thinks the pilot shortage is over is probably not looking very carefully at the data. Just a note on format, I'm going to let the panel go 5 over. We're having such a great conversation. I'm going to take one more question from the audience, and then I'm going to have a quick close for all of you. Is there any other questions? Thought I saw a few hands, but a little difficult for us to see. Okay, then great. You can all have an extra 15 seconds. What we heard the first panel talk about, the closing question was, what does the industry look like in 10 years? And I think that's my question. What does the industry look like in 5 years or in 10 years' time? I'll start with you, Brian.
I want to go last.
Yeah. You're so shy, so
I'm very optimistic. And while I'm sleeping better, Lyle, that's 2 hours versus 0 hours. So just to put some context there. Look, we see flight schools are full. We saw Emory Riddle announce, record classes coming into the profession. So I think, again, if the first step was build awareness, reach a consensus that there is a problem, let's build awareness, that there is a great career opportunity here. I think that's a box we can check. Not that we should slow down or, pull back on our efforts to continue to promote the profession. But I think, overall, we're seeing the hard work of the last 4 years is actually starting to, there's green shoots, right? So, but we can look at the data and we can see there's still not enough training infrastructure in the country to satisfy the ultimate need when we get to peak retirements in 2023. So, foot's still on the accelerator when it comes to, both pilot development and technician development programs. So we shouldn't rest on those issues. But again, I'm very optimistic on the future of the regional, mainly because I think when I look at what we do, which is feed our network partners, I sense their optimism, about continuing to grow, that the brand matters now, that the product is important. It used to be, race for the bottom on costs, and I'm not saying that's gone. Costs are sort of still on the table stakes to get in, safety's table stakes, but now the conversation's focused much more on, the quality of service and reliability of the product and the seamlessness of it. And that forces us to become, better at what we do in terms of delivering a seamless product for our network partners. So I like that direction of where the industry's going.
Yeah, I agree with Brian. I'm very optimistic as to what we see and the value and the role we play, but I do believe we need a great deal more outreach. We've got to continue to plant seeds and stimulate interest of folks wanting to get into this business. I think there's so much more we can do to get the message out to farther corners of our country and our areas that we operate in, to make people aware that this is such a viable and exciting and real, achievable, attainable goal for them to be an aviator in this business. So I do believe we need to do that, but I also believe there's still a good deal of work to do, and I think that when you talk about pathways, I'm thinking about the pathways that still is a barrier to entry. There's the funding of someone that has to experience the entire burden of building those extra 1,000 hours or so. But there's also, we've got a great deal of data ever since this program started that we've all collected, very good scientific data, real-time, actual data of the quality of the candidates and what we've had to do from a training perspective. I think we've all done we've made our programs, so we continue to push the bar on our programs up, our training programs, to make sure we have the highest quality candidate that comes out. But I do believe that we need to continue to petition our leadership at the FAA and the administrator to look at these alternate pathways that exist that can take the scientific data that we have, the safety-centric data that we have, and use that to apply to create pathways that gets these prospective aviators from these great programs that exist today more quickly into further supervised, really quality training, really quality hour-building programs that can get them into the seat better as a higher quality candidate than happens today. We need to do that. Very optimistic still. I think the tools are in place. We've got to have action still.
Okay, so two optimists, Steve?
I'm going to be an optimist as well. And I think one thing we underestimate, we don't take credit for the regional airline business, is our ability to adapt with relatively few resources. I think you get a core team. I think we all know it. We all have the core team of people that work in our organizations that actually get a bit of a high out of solving those problems that we continue to see to remain competitive with the regional airline business. The airline business is competitive enough and changing enough, and I think it's even, it's magnified at the regional end just because of the pressures we have over here in the environment we're in.
Jim?
Well, I will say it's a great time to be part of the flying public because it's fierce competition for, if we go look at where regionals have gone, we have shrunk. In general, I think we're 5 or 6 years behind mainline when it comes to consolidation. The other panelists talked about that. That's real, and it's competing on who can provide the best value for the end customer, and that's seamless product. So that's a kind of an overall trend that we see happening. One thing we didn't spend a lot of time talking about, what is a very concern of mine, is actually mechanic or technician shortages. I think we talked about it. There were some other sessions we had, but it doesn't get as much press. But when we look at the age of the major airlines technicians, and we see what's happening there, when a downturn happens, and that's when technicians typically say, I'm done. And some of these folks that are in their 60s are going to end up retiring, and they're going to come and get them from a lot of us. So It may not take as much time to get a technician through to get their A&P, but getting them from their A&P to be proficient and being an effective mechanic takes years. And that's something that, I don't want to be a negative Nanny here, but that's one thing I think that we need to spend a little more time focused on. But overall, it's a good picture for the regional space.
Yeah, and I would ditto with that, my colleagues here. Very optimistic about the regional airlines and the next 10 years. One thing we didn't talk about was technology, and I think that we're going to see some real technology improvements over the next 10 years, like electric aircraft. You know, it's not that far away, and someone's going to do it. So I think we're going to start to see more technology come into the airlines. I agree with Joe, the challenges with the technician shortage is here and it's real, and we need to spend as much time and effort as we have with the pilot sourcing as we should with the technician shortage.
My concern is there's two items we really didn't talk too much about today. We focused a lot on pilot issues, but from a technology standpoint, we need to make sure that regional aircraft are not shut out of our major hub locations from a technology standpoint. That could hurt our small communities as much as lack of pilots. So we need to be very aware of how we move forward from a technology perspective. And additionally, because of these mainline airline scope clauses, most carriers allow a 76 or 78 seat aircraft or smaller, and then a second category of a 66 or 65 seat category. You know, this industry was built on 50-seat aircraft, and we're probably not going to see new 50-seat aircraft developed, but we need a robust aircraft type in the 65 to 66 seat range, which it seems like we really don't have a real good choice in that area at this point in time. So those are my two concerns.
Well, the good news of being last is I just can agree with my peers on everything that you said here. I think we kind of ended that way. But I would like to make a couple of points. I myself, you know, am very optimistic about where the industry is going and the opportunities we have in front of us. There's never been a time in this industry where we haven't faced some critical challenges. So they're always going to be there. Right now it's focused on the human side of it, but those challenges will remain. I would like to point out that one area that I'm concerned about is as the industry grays out, as people retire, it affects the management of the company too. So we still got to make sure that we've got a good source of younger people that have the desire to move into management. Right now you see more of a trend. How can I get to the right seat of a mainline carrier faster than any other way? But at some point we got to be making sure we're picking off these people that have the talent and the desire to be in the people management and the technical side of it to help support all these new pilots and new mechanics that we're going to have. So.
Absolutely. So Rick, I'm going to give you the chairman's prerogative. You're going to get the final question here, and it's something you can redirect out to the audience. But we all are here because we love the regional airline industry, and we love the service that we provide, and our supply partner companies are here as well for the same reason. So give us some homework. What should we all be doing over the next year to defend this industry we love so much?
Again, I think you need to be engaged. I think we all need to be engaged. We all play a very important, vital role in the business. And I think we've got to have a major outreach. It's not just the airline's problem, and it really isn't just the government's problem. We all have to play a role, and even the smallest roles, those successes will all build on successes. So I think the takeaway is to go out there and take an action. Do something different than you have done today or done in the past. If you've not done anything to increase interest or to plant seeds or to create or motivate folks to even take a glimpse or look at the great opportunities, the vast opportunities that exist in our industry. Because many of them won't ever have that access or even think about it unless we give them the opportunity to listen or expose them to it. There's a bunch of us here, and you have a bunch of folks like us back at home at our companies. And I think we need to have this something that breeds a lot of motivated outreach success, because we've got to get those kids in those younger years, even the latter elementary school years, all the way into junior high and high school, so they see this as a real opportunity that's achievable and attainable for them. And many of them, it's probably not even on their radar. So we, as leaders, as people currently invested, need to go about and do that. That will help us build these pipelines. That will help us hopefully solve some of our problems of sourcing, because we need an interested grassroots effort, or we need a population that wants to aspire to be in the aviation industry.
So I'm hearing go forth and motivate, right? But before you do that, go forth and network. So I think we'll bring this panel to a close. This was just so wonderful. Thank you to all of our panelists.